Through the years, from the very earliest days of this country, there has been a joining of the government and the private sector to accomplish really the building of America. And it's been done in many, many ways. I was startled and surprised and frankly very, very happy when Mr. Joukowsky brought that document in from George Washington's administration about the establishment of industrial policy that placed the American government in synchronization with the then new manufacturing programs, industries in America. You talked about the mill towns. They didn't just happen. They happened because there was a government policy working with them, those entrepreneurs, to create these new businesses, these new jobs. And down through the centuries, more than almost two and a half now, we have been able to use this synergy, this government working with the American public, the private sector, to create this incredible country we call America, and really to create the American dream that all of us possess or have participated in. Today, we're in a discussion, if you will, with the American public about whether to continue that coordination of the public governments, state, local, federal governments, working to achieve a goal in the private sector. There's a different vision out there that basically says, get out of the way, get government away, and things will go well. Eliminate all regulation, eliminate all of the programs, and let the free market do it. It's never worked. And the proof of it is found in the first decade of this century. The first decade of this century, that philosophy of push government aside, deregulate, reduce taxes, and get government out of the way actually created a situation of the Great Recession and no jobs. In fact, 8 million American jobs lost. We need to go back to the policies that actually created growth in America, the policies of Franklin Roosevelt, carried out by Truman, Eisenhower, even Ronald Reagan and Lyndon Johnson carried out the very basic policies that, working together, we can build a great country.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I believe, as you just indicated, our history, our American history, is replete with the soundness of government planning and policies that incorporated investments from the public sector. And it made us strong, it retained our strength, it was a sustainable outcome. And the way of the world today is other nations are doing that with their private sector, co-investing with them. And when you look at the scenario of threats to cut some very valuable programs, you know you're going to place our businesses at risk. And if there's anything I hear from my middle class that is disgruntled with Washington, is that they're not against people making money. They're not against that. They're concerned and they're deeply upset by the undue influence that a growing few, most powerful, have on the process. They see it as insatiable greed. They see it as a rejection of what worked in the past, where people shared the wealth, shared by investing in America's middle class, which is that intellectual capacity, is that innovative spirit, is that potential for the next generation of jobs. And that's where our strength lies, and that's why they're upset. The undue influence has caused this insatiable greed that produces a drain on the middle class of this country and therefore reduces the number of jobs that we could possibly have in this nation.
I noticed that two of our colleagues have joined us, Ms. Capter from Ohio, but before we turn to her, I want to pull up this, and if you'd had this next to you while you just made the statement about the change in the nature of America's wealth. This chart has become, I think, rather famous, or infamous, I think is a better word. The blue line here is a chart that shows the growth in the wealth, the income of the top 1% of Americans. And down here is what the rest of Americans have had over the last 20 years or so. What we've seen is basically flatlining for the middle class and certainly for the poor. No improvement, or very, very little improvement in their situation, while the very small 1%, this is the 99% here, this is the 1%. And this is the anger that you now see in the streets of America. And it's exactly what you were talking about, Mr. Tonko, with a few, 1% of the American public getting an ever-increasing share of the American income and wealth, creating a bifurcated society, one with very few that are extremely wealthy and the rest that are actually growing poorer. With that, I think I'd like to turn to a woman from the great Midwest, the state of Ohio, that is enduring this exact hollowing out of the American middle class. Marcy Kaptur, thank you so very much for joining us, and thank you for your years of work representing your part of the what was once the great industrial strength of America. And I know that you want to share with us tonight some thoughts that you shared with me earlier this day as you went home, as you talked to the men and women in Cleveland. Please.
Thank you very much, Congressman Garamendi, for your